Hello everyone, my name is Cailey and I'm a Master Marine Management candidate here at Dalhousie, and my graduate research project is on Class B lobster fishing licenses and the principles of fairness. I would like to begin today by telling you a story I heard all too often this summer from fishermen the Department of Fisheries and Oceans view as, quote, illegitimate, with no real stake in the lobster industry. These fishers come from generations of fishing families, and their culture and livelihoods are attached to it. Lobster continues to be a key income source for them. They obtained their license in the same way other lobster fishers did. Yet, because they had alternative employment outside the fishery in 1976, they were deemed as Class B lobster fishers, or in their words, second-class Canadians. To set us up so that we're all on the same page, a simplified explanation of the lobster fishery would be handy. So when deciding to fish for lobster, you must first obtain a license. You then have the privilege to fish that license, which enables you to sell your catch. After you sell that catch for the season, you have the option to sell or transfer that license to someone else or renew it for another year and fish again. However, this process went on for a long time with little regulation. And in the 1970s, DFO recognized that there were too many licenses in the industry and conservation and protective measures were needed to be put in place to protect the stock. And that's why in the 1970s, policies were created to safeguard lobsters from the pressures they were experiencing and help the stock rebound to healthier levels. This established a limited entry fishery and the creation of Class A and Class B lobster fishing licenses. And those who had employment outside the fishery in 1976 were allocated a Class B license, whereas those who solely relied on the fishery for income were allocated a Class A license. The ability to sell or transfer a Class A license has become very lucrative in recent years, and for the most part, a Class A license is only available to large corporations or those who have access to substantial credit. The threshold of income needed to be classified as a Class B was anyone making about $7,000 or more outside of the fishery. And it's important to note that even if we calculated for inflation, this income is well below Canada's poverty line. In addition, Class B licenses cannot be sold or transferred, and they cease to exist upon the death of the license holder. And it's hard to say how many fishers were originally given a Class B license, but we do know that less than 80 remain across the Maritimes. In 2021, lobster stocks were found to be healthy and not overfished in any Atlantic Canadian lobster fishing area, and lobster landings have never been higher. This image explains how from the 1970s to 2020, lobster stocks have returned to healthy biomasses in lobster fishing area 34. And although this particular graph is representative of one area for the purposes of this presentation, biomasses of stocks are healthy across the board. And this graph, among others published by private firms and DFO, indicate the 1976 policy achieved its objective of sustaining the stock and bringing it back to healthier levels. However, the concessions that had to be made to make the policy objectives achievable did not come without a cost. As Class B fishers age, and fishing for many has become difficult, they wish to sell or transfer their license to support their families into the future. I spent my summer interviewing 6 Class B lobster fishers to hear about their experience and perspectives on the sustainability of the fishery. Today, Class B lobster fishers are asking DFO to reconsider the policy to enable them to transfer or sell their licenses. However, DFO has repeatedly declined their request to amend the policy and used the justification of conservation and sustainability as the reasons why. This justification and wording has not changed since the policy was implemented almost 50 years ago. I heard many stories that overlapped throughout the summer, and some key findings of the research were that all participants explained their connection to the fishery was through their parents or grandparents, and that they had passed their traditions on to their children and families. Many fish to support their families, and it was and continues to be a key income source for them. The participants felt as though they were being penalized for making choices to put food on the table, as the alternative was to live under the poverty line. Some participants did express the need for conservation and protective measures in the 1970s, and this supports the idea that the policy achieved its objective. Though participants did mention the strength of the stock today, many of them expressed concern for the future of the fishery if generational fishers continue to be pushed out of it. In some, all fishers were confused as to why, when the stocks are so plentiful, and after following all the rules and taking on the burden of conservation, Class B licenses continue to be phased out, quote, to their demise. This policy had good intentions in 1976, but today it is no longer justified and discriminates against small-scale fishers trying to keep traditions alive and their families fed for generations to come. Despite legal reviews, lobbying efforts, and threats of Supreme Court challenges, the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans continues to use the same justification to uphold Class B licenses as was used in 1976. But that reasoning does not have a leg to stand on anymore. My research debunks all the justifications the minister uses and highlights why this policy is unfair. These stories and conversations were heartbreaking, and I hope you leave this presentation today with more questions than answers. For those policymakers watching this video online, how can we justify eliminating small-scale generational fishers from a fishery when stocks are strong? My main conclusions from my research are 1, that the 1976 policy failed to adequately consider the socio-economic context of lobster fishers when it was designed by focusing solely on non-fisheries income. My second observation is that the policy was implemented in a way that left many fishers unaware or not fully aware of the implications of taking on a Class B license. Therefore, given that the management goal of the policy has been reached and that lobster is now back to a healthy biomass, isn't it time that this policy is reviewed? It's been almost 50 years, and a transparent review of this policy could show an act of good faith and help to reestablish trust between Class B license holders and DFO. All this work would not have been possible without my research participants opening their stories and lives to me throughout the summer. I have them to thank for the outcomes of this research. There are also many people on the screen that I owe much gratitude to and thanks, and I'm sure there are some questions, so if you would please send them to me in an email, I'd be happy to get back to you. Thanks so much. And this is a selection of sources that I used throughout the presentation, but I have many more if you're interested more in this topic.